Hello everyone, this is Zeeebo and welcome to this Chaos Zero Nightmare video. So in this video, we're going to talk about which dungeon, the Lab Zero dungeon or the Zero System dungeon, is more effective for farming. So this is the question which a lot of people asked about. And the reason why people ask that is because the Dimensional Tunnel is available in the Zero System, which means that we are able to farm our Forbidden cards from your normal Zero System and also use the Zero System decks for your seasonal contents, because it will now have this icon right here. So my Chizuru is farmed from the normal Chaos dungeon because of this item, as you guys can see. So for this situation, personally, I think there's a lot of ways to analyze it, but we'll break down the strengths and weaknesses of the Zero System as well as the Lab Zero to discuss about which dungeon has the greater efficiency for farming and for what characters. Without further ado, let's start with the Lab Zero portion. So starting off with Lab Zero, well, the biggest strength for Lab Zero is usually the higher save data value. So for your normal Lab Zero dungeons, it's a lot easier to reroll the runs or the dungeons such that you get your tier 12, tier 13 or even your tier 14 save data value. At the same time, because the cost of rerolling the difficulty is lower compared to the normal Zero dungeon, you're able to reroll into the easier challenges, so you're able to get the higher save data value while clearing through the full dungeon for maximum deck building efficiency. So for the normal Chaos dungeon or the normal Zero System, whenever you do the reset, what you need to do is you need to use the Chaos manifestation currency to reset these dungeons. So this is where you might be forced with a choice of the undesirable world that you don't want to farm in, right? You might be faced with a choice of the lower save data value and having lower rare fate occurrence or even really tough challenges. So in terms of the save data value to the challenge difficulty runs in general, Lab Zero will be much easier compared to the Zero System in most cases. So it will be easier for players who doesn't have that strong of a deck, and for players who don't actually mind too much of the optimization of the deck because they just want to clear through the Chaos dungeons to farm for the currencies or the supply shop, as well as also just clear through the runs to get a decently strong deck to play with. So another thing to consider would be the equipment portion, because there are certain equipments which are purchasable from the store in Lab Zero that are insanely consistent and good for your specific units. So for example, Overcurrent Shock unit, really good for units that draws a lot because of their fixed damage per draw with no limit, by the way. There's also the likes of your W52 Dopamine Ejector, which is a 20 to 40% boost for the carry if they have draw capabilities, so you can buy this from the shop as well. There's also Mutant Predator Spike, pretty consistent 30% damage boost, and the Super Conductive Protein. So these are all really good equipments on most DPSs or even supports that are purchasable from the shop, so they're easier to hunt in case you're optimizing your equipments. There are also really good event-based equipments like Rocket Adone Cap, which is damage reduction, 1 draw, your Wings of Freedom, which is damage when you're hit by the opponent, and last but not least, the Emblem of Exceptional Entity right here, which is just really powerful flat out damage amount increase, which is gonna fix on most carry. So for these specific events, it will be harder to hunt, but in general, the Lab Zero has easier access to good equipments which you can buy from the shop and hunt more easily because of the easier rerolls, so that, let's say if you're hunting for the better equipments, Lab Zero will be the way to go. So another thing to look at it is the easier reroll for the specific mythical equipments, such as the Foggy Crystal Ball, as well as the Fragment of the Empty Void. So these are all the mythical equipments that you get after you defeat the boss, because there's lesser choices. Let's say if you're hunting specifically for this one, right? You have a higher chance to hunt for this one after you clear the run compared to your usual Zero dungeon in general. So there's also the Chimera Knight, which is insanely powerful as a mythical equipment as well. So equipment side, Lab Zero has a slight edge in most cases because the stronger equipments can be purchased from the store, so easier to hunt. And even for the mythical equipments, it's a lot easier to reroll into them because you have lesser choices. And if you are hunting for specific equipments, Lab Zero is also better. But that doesn't mean that the normal Zero System doesn't have strong equipments, because if you take a look at the normal City of Mist for the Zero System right here, we have Contaminated Helmet, which is really good HP and defense percentage boost. But it is a event-based equipment, so you might not get it that easily. There's also the Flower of the Dead Souls, so this is just insanely good for combo-based unit in most cases. because you just increase damage amount of the second attack card onwards. So yeah, if you have units which does a lot of attack throws every single turn, then they always benefit from this in most cases. There's also the likes of Dream of the Devoured, as well as the upgraded Void of Devoured, which can benefit with some exhaust based characters. They also have the likes of the badge over here. So Eye of Gluttony is also the entity version in your normal City of Mist, plus 40% damage amount, but at the end of the turn, 30% to exhaust one card. So it is a very strong boost with some drawback, but just really good for most carries in most cases. So some of these Zero dungeons, they have good equipments, but they're just harder to get because they could be event specific, because you have more mythical choices, so you might not reroll into the correct one. Like for example, Verdant Shackles, really good, plus attack, plus defense. There's also the Branch of Eternity, which gives you damage off your heal or recover. So if you want to make your healers also do damage at the same time, this is an insanely good equipment. But as you guys can see, they are still not unlocked yet, despite me playing through my dungeons a few times. So you can actually want to hunt for them, but whether or not you get them is another matter. So there are some strong equipments in the Zero system, but they're just more RNG based, much harder to optimize and get if you want to sort of have more control over your runs. So that's for the equipment side. Generally, Lab Zero is more consistent to ensure the desired equipment's combination. So if the Lab Zero is more superior on the ease of clearance, as well as the equipment's portion and also having the seasonal currency, why would you want to go back to the Zero system to farm? This is where the Zero system is more attractive for very specific deck thinning or deck duplications, because there are certain units which appreciates having one card duplicated multiple times. They don't really care too much about the faint memory. They just care for having very specific cards duplicated. So the best example, if we go into the game right now, before we touch on this point, is Trezor. If you take a look at the current Great Rift ranking, a lot of the top teams, or in fact all the top teams, they're running the Trezor Cages comp. So if you take a look at their decks in general, Trezor right here just wants Shadow Reload duplicated in most cases, and you take a look at the equipments, these are all the pre-season equipments, right? If you go into, for example, the second player right here, you can take a look at the Trezor, right? 3 Shadow Reloads, this is your pre-season equipments. So this is where certain units which doesn't really care too much about the equipment portion and just wants their key card duplicated would appreciate the Zero system more, because the Zero system has way more card removal events. For example, Lab Zero has 3, Storm of Judgment has 7, Blue Pot has 6, Twin Star has 3, so not that good for your deck building. City of Mist has 6, this is the Zero system one. Photo Ruins have 5. So having more card removal event in the Zero system allows you to remove unwanted cards from your support or semi-DPS more easily, so that you can pinpoint select the card you want to be duplicated after the first and the second boss fight. So that's one of the reasons, because you get the duplicate event guaranteed on the first boss and the second boss if you're able to defeat them. And if you remove all the unwanted cards, chances are you will get the cards that you want to optimize on duplicated after the boss fight. So that's reason number one. Another reason is the card copy event. So I'm not sure whether or not this is a personal meeting, but for the card copy in Lab Zero, it's Heart of the All Vein. It doesn't occur as often as compared to the other dungeons like Storm of Judgment, where Root of Remembrance almost always occur for my run. So in a way, I say all these Zero system dungeons, their specific card copy event, they occur more frequently, at least based on personal vibe. So you are guaranteed that additional copy effect every single turn on top of the boss battle copies. So let's say if you want to get the 4 copy Trezor deck, you get 1 from the boss, 1 from the card copy event, as well as 1 from the second boss, on top of all the card removals that you're able to do along the way. So this is where Zero system is just a lot easier to do, or easier to achieve that objective compared to Lab Zero. So this is why people are going back to the Zero system to farm their decks up. So in conclusion, Lab Zero generically will be still more superior in most cases, because you just get more safe data value in most cases, a much easier run for you to clear, and also the seasonal currency for you to exchange for the freebies in the supply store. So there's also your duplicate event in Lab 0, so if you're really lucky, you can still get your very specific duplicates on the cards you want. So even though it has lesser removal event, but generally the dungeon quality for Lab 0 is higher. But if you have very specific unit builds that requires you to have 4 copies of one cards, right? For example, the biggest example will always be Trezor, because right now we have the Great Rift. So if you look at all these decks right here, all these units, they have a whole bunch of the same cards duplicated. And obviously you can get all this duplication from the seasonal dungeon Lab 0. It's just tougher. So if you want a more efficient farming for this kind of deck, then Zero System is better in this situation. So it's not saying that Zero System is better for duplication, because there's still a lot of RNG involved, but the probability of getting a 3 or 4 dupe on one unit is easier on the Zero System compared to the Lab 0 side. So this is where you go there to farm. Okay, so that's pretty much it for this video. Hopefully for those of you guys who are not sure why people are farming the Zero dungeon, or not sure which unit to farm in which dungeon, has a clearer picture of what to do moving forward. That's it for this video. I will see you guys again in my next video. Bye guys.